Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 37, another 7 curious, interesting things I saw last week. Let's crack on. The first one is a Photoshop plugin, or in fact it's actually more about Stable Diffusion than it is about the Photoshop plugin, but I shall explain both. So Stable Diffusion is the thing that is powering all those things like DALL-E and Imagen. You know, there's things where people say I'd like a polar bear on an aeroplane and it can then just generate them. So those are being created by the likes of DALL-E 2 and Google's Imagen, but those are closed. You don't know quite how they're trained and you don't really get access to the levers behind the scenes. However, Stability.ai has created an open source version of that where you get all of that control. So people are starting to create some really interesting projects because they've now got access to the levers, including Christian Cantrell, who has created a Photoshop filter. So if you have been thinking it's really interesting, I'm not really sure how to play with this because it seems a bit nerdy, then just go to Christian's website, download the free Photoshop plugin, plug it in, and then start generating your image based on text prompts like a delicious cup of coffee, a family of Arctic foxes, a family of adorable red foxes. And if you like what it's generated, you can either then generate more like it, or you can just change it and keep going and going until you do find what you like. So there you go, download that, have a play. This is the Euro Night Sprinter network concept. It's not actually a thing, but this was a concept by the German Green Party, and it will join together 40 international rail networks at night. So this is really a plan to get people out of air transport, which is highly polluting, and using the rail network at night when it's not really being used, and also when power is cheaper. This is, as I say, 40 international networks connecting 200 cities, I guess all the way from Helsinki down to Malaga, if you really wanted to. So these are high-speed trains, 100 and something miles an hour, nearly 200 kilometers an hour. It would need to be doing that sort of thing to make it make sense. But other than that, I really like the idea of it. This is how do you actually revolutionise transport and get people out of airplanes into trains. There you go. Pepe the Frog, who'd have thought? I've been talking about that. So Pepe, if you don't know who Pepe is, it's a relatively dark meme on the internet. You or I probably wouldn't use them, but they're used in the relatively dark, shadowy places of the internet. Not particularly nice meme. However, there's been lots and lots of animations turning up of Pepe doing really weird things like you're seeing right here, maybe 20-second animations with no explanation whatsoever. And everybody was starting to think about what's going on. So my grown-up children sort of said, what's going on? So clearly I'm going to research it. Now it turns out that this is Matt Fury, who originally created Pepe the Frog back in 2005 for the Boys Club fanzine, or a zine, and it was just a cool character with the catchphrase "Feels good, man," and people started to actually put their catchphrases into that box at the bottom, and then an alt-right group on 4chan started to use it for fairly devious things, and therefore that's where it became this dark meme that was actually a particularly nasty meme, and therefore nobody was associating with it. And obviously when Pepe the Frog started to turn up again, people thinking, hang on, what's going on? And it was Matt to try to reclaim actually a brand that had been subverted by some right-wing people, basically. So I thought it was really interesting how an artist is now making all of these animations are available as NFTs, but it's trying to flood the market to try and retake a brand that a meme had stolen from him. So that's quite interesting, and why it's in the Dinosaw. There you go. This is about a text message, or a series of them, that were sent out by the Californian power grid and the local government to stop power outages happening because of the high temperatures and therefore the high power demand for things like air conditioning, etc. So what happened was, as you can see from the power usage chart or demand chart on the right hand side, there were record high demands going on from 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and at 5:48 p.m. they sent out a text, which is an emergency alert that basically said, please could you stop using electricity, anything that's non-essential, until 9 p.m. People absolutely followed the letter of this, and as you can see on the graph, you can see where the text came out, and it actually dropped by 1.2 gigawatts within 5 minutes. And by 8 o'clock, then they didn't need it anymore. Emergencies were off. Other parts of California didn't actually get the message, or a little bit muddled, but actually it did show that there was a really good demand for this. So I thought it was interesting about how do you do this the second time and the third time and the fourth time, where people start to lose interest in this kind of public, I guess, coming together. So how do you gamify power non-usage on mass audiences. So that was really interesting where that's going. So yeah, see if it happens again or not. iOS 16, specifically the new iPhone 14, now has what's called Dynamic Island. So if you have I guess, I don't know what it was, iPhone 12 and above, I think it is, you may have the notch, or it might be above that one, I'm not sure. Then the notch has been a very iconic and controversial part of the interface, or the hardware, shall I say, and the interface just kind of had to move around it. With iPhone 14, or at least the Pro versions of iPhone 14, they've embraced the notch. They've created this lozenge. Other phones, lots of Android phones, have had this punch-through camera, little circle. So Apple have basically embraced it. Rather than just saying just avoid it, they're now using what's called Dynamic Island. I just thought it was a really neat exercise in UI, how to cram lots of really interesting things and embrace the fact that the hardware is there and you can't see it, but the way they've designed it I think is really, really interesting. So yeah, if you're into UI, then this might be an interesting thing to look up. It's kind of cool. This is PsyGan AR. Now this is quote-unquote a weekend project, and I wish I could do projects like this in the weekend, but what it is somebody experimenting with mapping their physical world with different quite interesting textures, and these are all sort of generative textures as well. They're all using the stuff you were seeing before, so the likes of Stable Diffusion, but what's really going on here, somebody has scanned their room using an iPhone 12 just to get the actual physical objects, and has then mapped onto it lots of different versions of, I guess, fantasy landscapes, etc. So what I thought was really interesting is just, this is quite an interesting thing you can do in a weekend now, but also in the future when we're using AR and VR glasses, then we can all be walking around the same physical environment, bumping into the same things, but we're all seeing very different things. Now, it's clear this is not a new concept, but I just like the way this has been visualized so that we can all see it all in one go now. So if somebody sees something in the corner that you don't see, they can maybe go, oh, well, I can see a fantasy deer in the corner, and they can give it to you to see as well. Interesting, so go and have a look at that one. That's quite interesting. And finally, slightly curious, and this has actually been basically validated by Microsoft as well, that apparently in, what would it be, 1980 something, late 80s, if you had a Windows XP laptop and somebody close, or a speaker system close, was playing Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation, then if you did have a 5400 RPM hard drive, then playing Rhythm Nation would actually cause it to go into a resonant frequency which would crash the hard drive. So just Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation apparently, and this was verified, apparently manufacturers at the time were aware of this and actually updated the software to be aware of these and flatten out the frequencies a little bit and avoid these issues. But also, I thought was interesting, they also said that by the time it was actually an issue, then Rhythm Nation had waned from the chart, so they didn't think it was actually an issue. So if you're into the hardware game and you're making stuff, then you might want to be starting to play some Janet Jackson tunes, see if your hardware withstands it. There you go. So I thought it was kind of interesting to end on. Hopefully that was interesting, hopefully it was useful. If it was, then it really helps if you send it to somebody else and spread the word. Maybe subscribe, maybe like, and I will see you next week.